Salutations, listeners.
Sivalsvala.
Valar Morghulis.
Nanu. Thank you for tuning in. This is Three Men in a Basement, and we are the Ultra Crepidarians. My name is Colin McLeod.
Mark Culp here.
Action Jackson.
That was a good one, Xmas Jackson, Flaxen Waxen. Okay, this is a podcast, right?
I think so.
Allegedly.
We're in a podcast.
Allegedly.
Right now. We're deep in it.
Yeah.
Stuck.
And in this podcast, we review movies, or we've been known to.
Most of the time.
And we like to review movies and deliver to you an average schmuck's opinion about hidden gems in the wide world of cinema. In this podcast, we like to target movies that are not total blockbuster smashes. We also like to target ones that are not so obscure that you couldn't get your hands on a copy, even if you so desired. Even if your little heart desired. Instead, we like to target movies right in the middle. Movies that are well-known enough to be accessible, right? You might be able to find these on the shelf of a Mammoth video, perhaps,
Yeah.
a Blockbuster video.
Hollywood video.
Or
That's the best kind of wood.
Fem-Illy video. Oh, we're dating ourselves, aren't we?
Yeah, how about just Movies Are Us?
Movies Are Us, exactly. You're right,
I
Mark.
guarantee that existed somewhere.
It did. It absolutely did. You might be able to find these movies on Movies R Us's shelves, but they're not going to be the kind of movies that everybody's heard of, everybody's seen. Come on, you're not going to... If your grandmother's heard of it, it's probably the wrong movie.
Right?
You got to push a couple movies to the side to get to these ones.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. But they'll be there.
Yep.
Promise.
Oh, so help me, they'll be there. Yeah, the kind of movies that, like, maybe you've heard about, maybe you saw once upon a time and you're wondering if they're worth a rewatch. Listen to our podcast and we'll tell you, and then you don't have to think. And
In no uncertain terms.
That's the best part about America, is we do the thinking for you.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Capitalism.
God, it's so good. So good. I love it.
And
It's the best.
and timely, because what did we review this week, gentlemen? In our 54th? 54th episode of the podcast, what did we review?
We reviewed The Navigators.
Yes.
Not to be confused with, was it Flight of the Navigator?
Not Flight of the Navigator.
No.
The Navigators. The other Navigator movie.
Yep. That's the one.
The third in the Navigator trilogy that has nothing to do with the other two.
Correct.
Right.
Yes. Okay, The Navigators, a 2001 film, rated R.
Yep.
Yeah, kinda.
For one reason in particular.
One reason, like, only.
Yeah.
And I feel like they could have made this a PG movie had they just switched up the dialogue.
Yep.
But even so, I think that the swearing obviously is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like... I don't know if this is going to make any sense. It didn't feel like obscenity. It felt like just language. You know, it felt like people just talking to each other.
It was very conversational. I've
Yeah.
definitely talked with people like that multiple times. And it felt very natural. It felt like something that would have happened in a break room or locker room kind of setting.
Yeah, one of those settings. Fuck it. Fuck it. We'll do it live.
Fuck it, we'll do it live. Okay, yeah, rated R. I would definitely give it rated R for the amount of profanity, but you're right that it's kind of buried in the dialogue. Also, you'll come to know this when we read the description, but it takes place in England. A lot of the people have either borderline Cockney or like Scouser accents. I know those are very distinct, but there were definitely a couple people who had each. And so they sort of like bury the profanity. An hour and 36 minutes. Thoughts?
Felt long.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, it felt long. But, like, this is one of those movies where, like, it's a slice of life, and there wasn't, like, an identifiable, like, beginning, middle, and end. It was just, you know, it started and it ended.
Yeah. I mean, this is not an action film.
No.
It's just not.
I don't mean this in a negative way. Did you feel like this movie had a plot? Or, again, like, it felt like this was just like a day in the life kind of movie.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that this movie had a plot in the traditional sense. You know, I don't feel like this movie was fleshed out on a storyboard and somebody said, well, we need X, Y, and Z to happen and we'll fill in the rest. You know, this wasn't this is where we want to take the movie. It was exactly like you said, it was a slice of life. It was just a chapter, you know?
Yeah, and again, like, I don't want to confuse anyone. We're not shitting on it by saying this. It felt more real and more tangible because it didn't have, like, this is where the movie's gonna do this. You know,
Yeah.
It was, God, life is hard.
Should we do cherries on this?
Yeah.
Do a round robin on cherries?
Yeah, why not?
We got a pop over here.
Yeah, it was a big wet one over here.
Ooh.
I just had a normal cherry pop.
Oh.
Yep.
What's a normal cherry?
I don't know, but I can tell you it wasn't squishy.
All right, it's more like dusty.
It was just, I had a big old dusty cherry pop.
Wow.
Dusty cherry pop, new band name. I call it.
Oh, yes.
Dusty.
Oh, yes. Dusty cherry pop. Oh, boy, that conjures images.
Why does it sound like a folk singer from the South?
It does. It sounds like, or like Dusty Rhodes' female wrestling counterpart, Dusty cherry pop.
Or just like Edith woke up, you know?
And Milton just went to town.
That's vile. I would say that Edith is someone's grandmother, but
I don't think
not.
I don't think Edith is somebody's
Yeah.
grandmother. She's just a dirty old bag. Yuck.
I have one word for you, and it's yowza.
Yeah.
Sorry, Edith.
You should be sorry, Mark. How dare you?
God damn it, Mark.
My bad.
What the fuck is this movie about? Is there a guy that can help us with that?
Yeah, I do know this one guy from a while back, Mr. Reed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know him.
Yeah, Reed Description.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some know me by the name Eduardo.
I suppose that's true.
But you guys
We
don't.
know you by that now.
And we are some people.
We are some people. Not many.
So, here we go. 5 Yorkshire men try to survive after the British Rail is bought out by a private company. That's the shortest description I've ever given.
Yeah, and it's about,
It's apt.
yeah.
It is about 5 Yorkshire men who try to survive after the British Rail is bought out by a private company.
That's a fact.
We mentioned that this is a slice of life. That's the catalyst for the movie. You know, that's what ties it all together. But again, it feels like these 5, and it felt like more than 5. But I guess toward the end of them, I don't want to give too much away. But
I mean, it is centered around 5, and there are other players involved.
There's another description that I feel like is just a teeny tiny bit too revealing, but I feel like it might be worth trying to squidge that in right after Bumpa Blast.
Okay.
Just because it's a really good description, but it's definitely a little spoilery. Okay, what genres we got?
you might like this. It's pretty tight. Comedy and drama.
Andromeda.
Comedy Andromeda.
Drama.
I feel like Andromeda is the most dramatic person. She brings the drama.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Yes. This didn't feel like a comedy to me.
No.
Although I laughed a couple times.
I mean, there are definitely funny moments, but this is not a funny movie.
Yeah, there's a difference between like the characters making jokes and the subject matter being funny.
Right.
And it's definitely that.
Yeah.
The subject matter is dramatic. I agree with you. I don't know if I would call this movie a comedy. I tell you what, though, eventually, as things start to play out, it does sort of, end up with, one man. And he was like a one-man army just like plowing through
Damn it.
the railway system.
yeah.
You just had to go there.
I had to. I will never let that die. I will never
damn
let
it.
that die.
Yeah. The
IMDb deserves this.
the quips were
hate you so much.
the quips were delivered a lot like they were in Waking Ned Divine. It's conversational, and it's funny when you're paying attention.
Yeah, it's a couple guys chatting, and they'll occasionally slip a joke or, have a funny saying.
Yeah, whereas I would say like the bones of that movie are like wholesome and reassuring and comforting. The bones of this movie are dramatic and uncomfortable and depressing.
Everything about
But-
this is a struggle.
But the surface, right, like the frosting on the cake of both movies is like pithy banter that will make you chuckle because somebody came out with like a good zinger.
Yeah.
Well, it feels like it's just real. It feels like
Yeah.
it's real people riffing on what's presented to them,
Yeah.
like what they're going through. Relatable, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. Like I'm struggling with my own personal stuff, sort of like carrying all of this stuff all by myself because I'm a one-man army. It's... I'm so sorry. We can't see your finger, Jackson.
They can feel it.
Jackson's flipping me off for all of you in cyberspace.
I felt your finger, Jackson.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is that why you kept shouting my prostate, my prostate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I got it.
It all comes full circle,
Yeah.
Is that how you do it, little circles?
Well,
Usually that's best.
it starts off at a small circle.
concentric.
Yeah.
Okay. And then by the end of it, you're just like full on ramjet?
Yeah, we put the consent in concentric circle.
Ah, okay.
Everybody's different.
Like a snowflake.
Or a starfish.
Let's circle back to Starfish. I'm a little confused.
We probably shouldn't.
It's all in the creases, Colin.
Is it now? I'm learning things.
Starfish are known for their creases.
Yeah.
Gross.
Okay, so on the topic of starfish, who we got in this movie?
Well, top billing belonged Andrews, playing John.
So what do you know Dean from?
This movie.
All right. Who else we got?
Wait, was he also in this movie?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Has he been
Good for
in
him.
anything else
Yeah, he's been in a few titles, all, smaller British films. I've never seen any of them, but the biggest one I see here is Father Brown.
Fucking love Father Brown.
But yeah, that's his biggest title, I think. He was in a couple of Agatha Christie spin-offs and a couple of murder mysteries.
Well, don't forget we got Thomas Craig.
Yeah.
Yeah, Thomas Craig, known for the Murdoch Mysteries, Inspector Morse, and
The Paradise Club.
Shit, he was in the Umbrella Academy.
he was in Coronation Street as well.
Okay, so all this to say, no disrespect to anybody who's in this movie. You don't know any of them.
No.
Guaranteed. You don't know any of these fucking people. They are good actors.
Yeah.
And they sold this movie for what it was, and I appreciate that about them. But nobody really of note. Honestly, I couldn't give you one.
No, everybody in this movie played their part well.
Check me if I'm wrong, because this is kind of an intangible thing. But the way that this movie presents itself and plays out, they didn't feel like actors. It felt like people just being people.
Yeah.
And is that a testament to their abilities as performers, as actors? Or is that just more reflective of the kind of movie this is?
Well,
and you just had to show up and just be.
I agree with what you're saying, I do. But
You don't.
I will point out the fact that, like, if you were to pull people off the street and say, hey, we're making a movie, I want you to do this, someone who's never done it is going to overact the shit out of it.
That's fair.
So finding somebody that has acted before, no matter how small, they've worked with a director, they've worked with a crew, they'll do what they're told and they'll do it convincingly. There are good actors and there are not so good actors, but like these guys played the part that they were dealt, and the part that they were dealt was pretty simple.
Yeah.
So
Take that, Mark.
it wouldn't take
Get him, Jackson.
It wouldn't take a Benedict Cumberbatch to play any of these roles.
Right, but I don't think that a Benedict Cumberbatch could be in any of these roles.
Because he would overact the shit out of it.
Yeah, like
Got him. Go, Mark. Go.
this felt like just people off the street.
Yeah.
You know, like if you
It didn't. Yeah, you are right.
and it was the acting was so invisible there, or maybe it was so visible that it became invisible. You know, I don't know how to kind of quantify it. You know?
I agree with you, because like, is the mark of a good performer that you can't tell?
Yeah, I think so. So by that metric, they did great. But it was also delightfully boring and real. I don't know.
Yeah.
So like,
People have described me the exact same way. Delightfully boring, but real. You're a real person.
I don't think
you
I've
are
ever-
physically here, and your presence is noted.
I don't think I've ever been described that way.
yeah, good luck.
Just wait.
Jackson, you bore the shit out of me, but I can tell that you're sitting there. Mm-hmm. I can tell that you're here in the room.
That makes one.
Yeah.
I don't think you're fake.
I can also tell because of the smell.
But I won't remember you.
There is that.
There is that. Your presence is noted.
There is that.
Would you recommend this movie?
Honestly, no.
Any qualifiers to that while I bide for time?
I appreciate your honesty, Mark. So here's the thing.
Tell me the thing.
I can't conjure in my mind's eye someone I know that would enjoy this.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. I think this was well made. I think that they achieved what they were setting out to do. But I think it resonates with a very specific group of people. And I feel like those people probably don't want to be reminded of the situation they've been put in.
Yeah, so I'm going to piggyback on you there, and I will certainly not give this a blanket recommendation, but I will add a few qualifiers, kind of like what you were hedging around. So, a couple things to know about this movie, sort of going in. I don't think this is spoilery to say, but we can cut it out later if I dip a toe over the line. This movie is largely about the privatization of formerly collectively held business and industry, and what that does to the workers when private companies, private corporations, private industry take over, gut, and try to inject sort of this like unfettered malaise of capitalism into the workforce, how it ends up affecting people who were formerly well compensated, well protected, happy, and productive, is basically the nuts and bolts of this movie. How capitalism can destroy lives.
It's good.
So
It's good.
I would recommend this movie to people who are sympathetic to the struggles of labor and the labor movement. I would also recommend this movie to people who are skeptical about the way capitalists can destroy things that are working well, and how driving toward nothing but profit can cause even the most conscious thinkers and helpful people to make horrible decisions. If you are at all skeptical about that, this would be a great movie to watch, sort of like how it can play out in a really, really organic and believable manner. So yeah, the two groups I would recommend this to. However, if you are looking for a jaunty watch on your Friday night,
This ain't it.
This is not it. This is a tough watch, and not for anybody other than those two groups, or maybe the cinephile who just wants to tuck this in their back pocket. But for me personally, I actually really enjoyed it, and like, would I go back and recommend it to myself? Fuck yeah.
Yeah, I would recommend this to myself, but I think like Jackson said, it's not a good time, but it feels real. It feels relatable. And I know in your caveats, and as you kind of described it, Colin, this doesn't feel to me like a movie about capitalism. It feels to me about just regular people trying to exist. It didn't feel as though they were trying to push a message. However, when you're evaluating this movie, certainly everything that you said holds true, Colin. But the way that the movie is presented, it's not presented like it's trying to push a message. It's presented like it's showing you other people's lives, and the message is something that you have to sort of distill out of that. Again, they don't hide it, it's not a mystery, but this didn't feel like it was pushing a message. It felt like a message was pushed upon the characters. I don't know if that distinction makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not a documentary, right? They're not trying to sell you something, but it is unapologetic about what happens when private industry takes over things that should not be privatized.
Right.
And there is existing personnel, infrastructure, and labor potential there to be either utilized or squandered. And unfortunately, you oftentimes get a lot more of the latter.
Yeah.
But yes, you're right. It's not pushing an agenda.
But it absolutely is painting a picture that if you step back
Yeah.
and look at it, is clear as day.
Yeah, like it was kind of hard to see the concept, right? Because it was kind of high, and there were some moments of levity, so it was like sort of a high concept comedy. One would say. Jackson is very upset that I just did that.
Don't love that. Don't love that. Nope.
Oh fuck! How many more of these can I work in? They're bullshit genres.
More.
So I would say that's 3 probably non-Rex around. Is that accurate, or Mark? Are you going to go Rex side on it?
Again, it depends on how we're defining it. I am glad to have seen it.
General audience.
No.
I would say 3 no's.
Yeah.
Personally, yes for me. Yes for Mark.
I am glad that I watched it.
Yes for Jackson.
I feel this is one of those that I feel is important, albeit maybe not enjoyable for a lot of people. I feel like this would be hard to watch for certain people. I feel like this would lose a lot of people's interest really quickly.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I do actually have that on some of my things.
And I stand by that I would not recommend this unless somebody were specifically looking for
This kind of movie.
This kind of movie.
Yeah.
So, does that mean we're ready to...
See, we all died at the same time. And
Yeah.
that's what brought it all together.
That's what friends do.
Yep.
Yeah.
They die at the same time. So buckle up, guys, because my lifestyle choices are not great.
I got this sweet new flavor of Kool-Aid, guys. You want some? Or drink it.
I understood that reference.
Thanks, Captain America.
Okay, so do we want to kick this off by having Reed revisit us and read that secondary description.
Maybe.
It might kind of give us like a better nuts and bolts over the entire movie, because again, the movie, like Jackson said, is not really Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. You probably could slice it up that way, but there are weak distinctions, I would say, between those. All right, Reed, what do you got for us?
All right, so this is a bit of a longer one.
Yeah.
That's a wiener joke.
No, Jackson, it's like a penis.
Oh!
Yeah, no, he was laughing, but he didn't get it, Mark.
A wing wang, if you will.
Wang-a-lang.
A ding dong.
What? I don't know.
that?
I don't know, but I think something happened with Mark's ding dong.
In South Yorkshire, a small group of railway maintenance men discover that because of privatization, their lives will never be the same. When the trusty British Rail sign is replaced by one reading East Midland Infrastructure, it's clear that there will be the inevitable winners and losers. As downsizing and efficiency become a new privatization means that the customer will now come first. Something that is instilled into the men in their new training sessions. But there are inconsistencies and short-sightedness in the new ways. Men used to be working together now find themselves belonging to different competing companies. Some even have to tender their old jobs. Others decide to take the redundancy packages offered to them by the firm. As always, corners are cut in the interest of lowering costs, leading to a series of misadventures. That captures it all.
Yeah.
It does, and it doesn't give anything away.
There's really nothing to give away.
Yeah. I don't like that description, but I can't tell you why, because it's a good description.
It's flowery.
Okay.
I'll flower you.
But I feel like I got an idea of what the movie's about.
I'm threatening you with a good time.
Yeah, you are.
It's a sex thing.
Yeah. But no, you're right. I mean,
We're interested.
We're considering it.
Right?
We could be tempted.
But yeah, it's accurate. It's descriptive. But again, it's more flowery than it needs to be.
Right. So, how does this movie start?
Like all good day in the life movies, it starts at the beginning.
I mean, if you're going to start it, that's a good way to start. That's
yeah.
a good place to start.
Yeah.
Better than the middle.
I think it starts, they're on the track. I think
Yeah.
they're working.
Yeah, it's just like maybe 5-6 guys.
Or maybe it was 8 because it takes 8.
Actually, I
to
think you're
move.
right. Yes, it probably was 8. So let's say 8 guys in, high-vis jackets and bibs. They've been working on the railway all the livelong day, let's just say. And basically, their job is to work the track. So replacing the rails, replacing the spikes, replacing the wood underneath.
The ties.
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, they can replace those too. All of the infrastructure that makes trains go from point A to point B, their job is to maintain it. And basically kicks off with them working and coming in, and the crew walks into the sort of like depot meeting room to find their manager, Walmart Craig T. Nelson.
Correct.
Who has a memo for them. And the memo is, you are no longer a part of British Rail. British Rail ceases to exist. It has been cannibalized by a bunch of large corporations that are interested in, I'm going to use this word even though it has connotations that I don't think are accurate here, but investing in British infrastructure.
They're buying off pieces of a public entity to make a quick buck.
Investing it sort of carries the idea that like you're interested in seeing the success of this thing and not just cannibalizing it and turning it into a quick buck any way you can because you don't have a vested interest. Your interest is the money that this thing might be worth, whether that is as a functioning entity
or buying off assets to sell.
Or just fucking selling off the assets individually, like somebody parting out a fucking Buick on eBay.
Yeah.
Anyway, I say all that, not that I'm biased.
But you're right. I mean, in the literal definition of the word, they were investing.
Yes.
Because
yes,
they did,
in the capitalist sense, they invested, they bought the property. They bought the stuff.
And the people that came with it.
And they bought it from the British government, who allowed this through law, which is fucking crazy.
Yeah. Kind of stupid.
And what ended up happening was, as you can imagine, the second something goes that direction and privatizes, everything becomes about profits and maximizing profits, which involves downsizing the workforce as much as possible, paying people less if you can,
maximizing the amount of work that they can get out of the crew they have left.
Yes, so things like paying overtime instead of hiring other people, trying to get more senior persons off the payroll, having the workers purchase their own equipment, and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so the railway changes hands a few times. Actually, in the beginning, it's kind of fucked up because they ask a whole bunch of people to leave because they were on loan from a different depot that was also, it was all British Rail once upon a time, and that depot got bought out by a different company.
Yeah.
So when this got ripped apart and cannibalized by all of these investment firms, what it ultimately ended up happening was the people who used to work together to solve problems, and if one depot was short-staffed, people would move over temporarily and help them out, and vice versa. They used to be able to share work around. Those people had to go back to their own company, and they became rivals. You no longer can communicate company business to them.
No offering trade secrets or tips and tricks. No comparing notes. No sharing of equipment.
And of course, the guys are kind of laughing about this in the beginning of the movie. And the company gets bought a few times, changes hands a whole bunch. At the end of it, they don't even know who the fuck they're working for.
They actually made a kind of a joke about it because they were hanging a sign on the new sign. And one of the guys goes, well, we're going to get a new sign every week now?
Yeah.
But I bet you the first company, Midland, whatever, bet you they turned a profit on their, 3-week holding.
Yeah. Bought the place, killed off the workforce, sold what was left.
You know what was funny, too? Like, the mid part of the movie toward the end, when you see these characters as they're, like, finding other jobs and whatnot, you just see like a hodgepodge of high-vis vests and coats with just several different company logos on them. You'd have like a job and like every other person has like a different company attached to the high-vis vest that they were given. Just like a little detail that jumped out at me that just kind of like showed that like nobody really had any allegiances. They're just trying to get work, and they all come from all these different places, or they're splintered, and there's no way that wasn't intentional.
One thing that I caught was that one of the guys was wearing 2 different company vests at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
He was wearing the Midland infrastructure vest with a Gilchrist jacket.
Yeah.
Classic. Okay, so because these companies are in the business of maximizing profits, one of the things that they're trying to do is encourage people to leave the workforce, because the people who are currently working there are under union contract with British Rail, which when these companies acquired that piece of British Rail, they inherited those contracts. So it is in these companies' interest to get as many of these workers to resign, lay off, take buyouts, get fired, whatever, in order to stop having to abide by the protection that those contracts afford. Things like paid sick leave, things like
holiday time,
things like a guaranteed 40-hour work week. These types of things the blood-sucking capitalists want to do away with. So the first thing that they do is offer a buyout, which quite a few people take. Then they start to make things as uncomfortable as possible, and they start to try to infringe on specific elements of the contract that they feel like they can get away with in order to kind of bully the rest. Basically, if I can make it as unpleasant as possible, I can force some of the other workers to leave.
And if you can get the right one to leave, if you can get the right domino to fall, the rest will follow suit.
Right.
That's the logic. I mean, if you can get... So, there's a character in here, his name is Jerry, and seemingly he's the union rep for these guys.
Mm-hmm. He is.
And basically, my thought was, these guys need Jerry to leave, because if Jerry leaves, the rest will fall, and they can just bring in whoever they want. They can bring in scabs, they can bring in temps, they can bring in agency workers to get the job done.
They don't know any better.
And they don't know any better, and they're hungry for the work.
Well, and what they need is these people to leave either willingly or unwillingly. They need those contracts to end so they can basically abuse their workforce.
Yep.
And by abuse their workforce, one of the tactics that they're employing is, in the interim, while these large companies are still trying to get the workers to leave, they are paying the temporary workers who are not guaranteed basically anything. They are afforded no protections. Their contract is for an hourly wage, no more, no less.
And it's double what the contract workers are getting.
Yeah, there's no guaranteed hours, so you could be working, for £20 an hour, which sounds great to somebody making 8, but if you're making £8 an hour and you're guaranteed 40 hours a week, somebody making 20 who's getting 5 hours every 3 weeks, do the math, guys.
Yeah.
But all these people are hearing is, I'm getting 20 quid a week down the road. And so they're leaving these contracted positions, these protected positions, in order to pursue these seemingly lucrative jobs as what are ostensibly independent contractors.
Yeah.
Yeah, fleeting jobs.
They're freelance. So along with freelance comes, if you make too much of a stink, if you start to complain about safety, if you start to complain about working conditions.
If you make us look bad for any reason at all.
Or we just don't like your face, you won't get called back and your job is null and void because you're an independent contractor and I can just not hire you.
Mm-hmm. There's even like a great scene where management is talking to middle management. Middle management is discussing all of these like roadblocks that they're running into, and management, again, I don't know what any of these characters' names are, but he literally like signs a blank piece of paper and hands it to him and says, "I've already signed it. Feel free to fill out your resignation letter. You can either do what I'm telling you, or you can finish filling this out. I've already approved it."
And literally all the middle management type who the guy was flexing on, all he was trying to do is say, the people who are still here are under contract that we are legally obligated to uphold. And the guy is saying, I don't give a fuck. Mm-hmm. End the contract. Make their lives as miserable as possible. Infringe on the contract in order to get them to leave.
Yep.
The slate's been wiped.
So basically the meat and potatoes of this movie is these workers slowly but surely end up either leaving or getting fired or taking a buyout from their company, only to find themselves in considerably more dire circumstances. Not realizing that, they left the flock to find themselves among wolves.
Yeah, they left the land of milk and honey, and they are now just struggling to survive. One in particular, Paul, was followed pretty closely, and he was trying to pay alimony, or not alimony, child support. And his child support bill got increased and he could no longer pay it. So he was going to take the buyout and use it to pay his child support and find work wherever he could. And seemingly it worked out, but only just. And, he never knew where his next paycheck was going to come from. He never knew how he was going to afford what he needed to. Got this horrible apartment.
God.
Because it was probably all he could.
Actually, it kind of seemed like he got like 3 apartments.
Yeah.
When he was like taking his daughters around and like showing him his new place, he kept going back into like the communal hallway and using a key to like open up the flat that had their bedrooms, and then they had to use the bathroom, and so
which was down the hall and down a flight of stairs
in another locked room connected only by the communal hallway. Like, it was rough.
Yeah, it was pretty terrible.
Das ist nicht sehr gut.
Nah.
9.
Yeah, so things are getting worse and worse for this group of guys. And kind of like the second description said, like, you feel the tone shift pretty quickly from one of, like, camaraderie, cracking jokes, everybody's got each other's backs, they're interested in doing the job safely and correctly, into a tone of tension. Desperation, depression, concern, and one of a lot of infighting where, like, people are now protecting their piece of the pie, where they used to support each other, they used to, protect each other. And I think I don't want to like jump right to the end, but basically it culminates in a scene where 4 guys who were originally part of British Rail, who eventually, either left the company or lost their jobs, are now independent contractors working for a firm, not working for a firm, but being hired out on an hourly wage.
By a temp agency.
They're going through a temp agency.
They are trying to lay some concrete, and it is there's so many disgusting scenes in this movie, but oh my God, this one just fucking killed me, where the guy who contracted is openly saying, can't really get a cement truck down there or wheelbarrows down there. We talked about bringing in a train trolley and putting it there, but that was going to be so expensive. We wanted to be the lowest bidder, so you guys are just going to have to haul this concrete
in buckets
down off this bridge. Break your backs, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to be the lowest bidder.
So they're mixing it up on the street and then lowering buckets of concrete with a rope over the bridge and down to the bottom, where another guy will carry it over to the embankment where they're working.
And as you can imagine, there were several scenes previous to this where former members of British Rail, people who had been crew hands for a long time, were criticizing how these private contractors were doing their work because it was unsafe. There was a reason that, you need this many people, and you need, one person to be a lookout, you need one person to be a this, one person to be a that, and all of that shit was written and protected into their contracts, which they willingly left because they were tricked. And what ends up happening is they're doing a job that probably should have been at least 8 people.
Yeah.
They're doing it with 4 of them. They have no lookout, and lo and behold, one of them gets hit by a train that nobody saw coming, and they end up getting into an argument over this guy's wounded body. This guy is probably bleeding internally, gets hit by a fucking train.
Yeah.
Not dead yet. It's on the embankment, and they're getting into an argument about whether or not to get an ambulance, because if they get an ambulance, then
they could lose their jobs.
Yeah, the EMTs will have to report that he was hit by a train. If he was hit by a train, then the people doing the investigation from the government will know that there was no lookout. If there was no lookout, then it's going to come back on the firm that contracted out their work, and they won't get any more work. So basically, instead of helping their friend, instead of calling the only people who can save their friend's life, they are arguing over whether or not to either A, call the ambulance at all, or B, move him up to the road so it looks less bad on them that he got hit by a train, even though it shouldn't look bad on them at all, because they shouldn't have been fucking doing that in the first place. They were doing it because they were told, and if they didn't do it, they were going to get they were going to get no more work.
They weren't supposed to be there, and they would get fired for being there when they weren't supposed to, and doing things that they weren't supposed to.
And fired is a strong word, because that implies you have an employment contract. Right. They just would never...
be blacklisted.
Yeah, they'd be blacklisted. They would just never be called back.
Yeah.
I don't need to say this out loud, probably, but
capitalism.
That's capitalism. This is the type of thing that should never happen, and this is why we pass labor laws, to protect ourselves.
This is why
the
unions
workers
exist.
From this exact situation.
Yes, this is why unions exist, to protect workers and their families.
So here we are, sort of the end of the movie. It was a very disgusting but also flawlessly executed example of some of the more pernicious effects of privatization of public resources.
Yeah. One of the guys of the group died, and that served as the excuse to sort of end it. It was the capstone, I suppose. But I felt like the other 3 guys were just going to continue on going. This movie could have been hours long, because it was just them trying to get by.
Well, I mean, what was their option?
They had nothing.
Actually, this getting a little bit away from the narrative aspect of this movie, I literally just today watched. I don't normally watch TED Talks, but I watched a really interesting TED Talk on YouTube, and it was about a guy who wrote a play, and the play was entitled Kill a Climate Denier or something like that. You can imagine the type of response that got. And that was his point. He was trying to be antagonistic, and the whole purpose of the TED Talk was the insights that he gained from talking to climate deniers who came out to protest his play. And one of the things that I felt aligned really well with this movie, one of the central sort of theses of his talk, was this idea that most people who believe in climate change, which is most people in the world, they understand that climate change is real. They understand that this is happening. They understand it's caused by humans, but they have no recourse in their daily life to do anything about it.
No.
You can be as environmentally conscious as you want to, but the systems and structures in place right now that you have no control over govern the way you live your life, and even the people who are shouting the loudest about this will go right back to living life the way that they were raised, which we know is unsustainable. And it's not the fault of the individual that the system is structured in a way that doesn't allow for them to make proactive choices. And this movie is a great allegory of that, because you have these guys who got trapped in this situation through no fault of their own. There was a government owned and operated utility that they had a very healthy and well-developed contract with for their work, and it got bought out by private interests. The private interests went on a cost-cutting spree, and these guys are sitting here cannibalizing each other, not trusting each other, and making the only decisions that they can to keep themselves afloat, right? They've gone down to contract work, and they're making these horrendous decisions, which are the natural consequence of the system that they got thrown into.
Yeah.
And I thought the analogy between those two circumstances, right? Like the working circumstance of somebody who finds themselves in an overly capitalistic society that has no, social safety nets or buffers against rampant abuse by corporate interests, and the, environmental atrocities that are being caused by corporate interests and large-scale organizations, is one that is both disgusting, but also readily identifiable and palpable.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And I think that's part of why I went into my recommendation the way I did, because I think that this movie would resonate with a lot of people in a very uncomfortable way. I feel like a lot of the folks that I work with and that I hang out with, especially in the blue-collar work. I mean, I'm a blue-collar worker. I work for myself, so I am effectively freelance. I have to get my own jobs. I have to find my own leads. I have to create my own work. And
I've given you plenty of jobs.
It's true.
Hand jobs. Wait, what? What are we talking about?
Sex.
Yeah.
Labor.
Yes.
Which is...
Well, that comes after the...
Usually about 9 months.
Is that what it is?
Yep.
Yeah, one hand job, baby 9 months later.
Yep.
I thought it was from holding hands.
Nope.
That's all I've ever done.
Nope. You gotta take it to work.
You gotta what?
Gotta take that hand to work.
Yep.
Wear a glove.
But you don't have to clock off on Sundays.
I don't clock on Sundays.
Oh.
Yeah. Are we able to just kind of like organically segue into likes and dislikes?
I think we are.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
the
think we're
nuts
sort of
and bolts
doing
of
that.
this movie are pretty covered.
Yeah, in a way that is like actually true and not just what we say every week.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really liked how relatable this movie was, And again, this is an industry that I don't work for. This is a culture that I am not a part of. But the way that people were interacting, their relationships, and how they were facing adversity with sarcasm and then, just acceptance. It felt like this might as well have been a documentary. I know you had made some comments about this potentially based on a true story. It felt that way, but not in the way that a documentary would.
More like a dramatization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you just started recording people talking as they were going through it. That's how it felt to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've sort of waxed philosophic about the things that I enjoy in terms of this movie, like hitting the nail on the head, but just sort of in a sentence, like, what an incredible inside view of how privatization and anti-labor movements will insidiously erode the power of workers given the opportunity. Mm-hmm. It's a very well done movie from that perspective.
Yeah, I particularly liked, and I say this somewhat ironically because I don't like it in the real world, but I particularly liked the way this movie depicted the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
Because these guys were handed an envelope and they could open it and walk away. But what choice is that? Yeah. You're given security or you're given enough money to survive until you find something else.
And some of them turned it in positively beaming.
Yeah.
Right, because you're right. They felt like they were making the choice,
Yep.
and the choice wasn't being made for them.
Yeah, they were handed the envelope, and some of them were like, sweet, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Hate this job, hate doing this. I'm going to use this money to make my life better. And we never saw them again.
The depressing thing is that, like, they were right.
Yeah.
Like, I think certainly a healthy argument could be made that, like, the company wanted them to quit and they were trying to get them to leave, and the wise decision would be to stick to your guns. But I think the truth is that no longer existed. And
Nope.
You could choose to sit there and you could choose to be the last holdout, but ultimately the thing that you were fighting to keep no longer existed. And
Right.
You were fighting over semantics on paper because you were never going to win that.
Well, I think this is where I would disagree. I think this is the exact issue, right? Is, like Jackson was talking about, the illusion of choice. It is the belief that your choice is between staying or going, and that is presented as a binary option. Either way, the company wins. The third option would be, yes, to stay, but to organize.
Right.
And that's not even discussed or presented as an option, but it is the kind of thing that, like, it's hard to do because it's not something that a lot of people, especially if they've never been in an active labor movement, they can't imagine what that would look like, forcing the hand of the company into a position where they're not taking advantage of their workers, and they know that their workers are organized enough to cripple the company should it come to that.
And I know this takes place in Yorkshire, and I don't know their labor laws well enough to speak on it, but in America, obviously, we have specific labor laws and protections regarding unions, and
we used to.
Yeah, but the thing is, now we have at-will employment at most places, and they don't need a reason to terminate you.
What an idea that was.
Yeah. So I've seen groups get fired for trying to unionize. I've seen guys lose their jobs over saying the wrong thing in the presence of the wrong person. And I've seen it happen where they get terminated for XYZ, and we all know why they got terminated, but it has to be on paper that they got terminated for something else.
Yeah, and I understand the mechanics of what you're saying, but again, I want to push back on it. Like, I feel like these guys were fucked, and there was nothing that was going to unfuck them. And they had different ways of navigating their fuckdom, but ultimately, they were fucked regardless.
Well, that's what I was saying, is the illusion of choice.
Because there isn't.
Right.
You're just screwed over. You can be the last person there, or you can be the first one out the door, but it doesn't exist anymore. And maybe you could win an organized court case, but ultimately you're still not winning secured employment. You're winning a payout, maybe, but ultimately what you are fighting for and what you're trying to maintain doesn't exist.
The best possible outcome is to win the closest approximation of what you were owed.
Yeah, but
and if you're suing to retain your job doesn't exist. So your job boils down to a dollar amount, which they already offered in the redundancy.
This is what I disagree with, though. Like, this is the power of organized labor that they don't want to believe that you have, is if all of these workers united, which they have in the past in many industries and actually gotten a lot of this shit done, organize across the industry and say, we're not doing shit, the industry would come to a unintended screeching halt, and these companies would be forced to come to the table. They would be forced to negotiate not only new contracts, but contracts that they are going to abide by.
That or the industry dies.
Yeah, that or like fucking, have fun having no rails.
Yeah, we saw that with mining companies.
And I don't want to get too caught up on this like philosophical back and forth, but let me just try to put like a capstone on my argument. I don't know if the way that this hits me is merited, but it sounds like, and I know that this is not your intention, but it sounds like you're blaming the worker for not organizing. That if they had done this and this, they could have found an acceptable... I feel...
Oh, no. Certainly not. That is not my intention to say that it is the worker's fault. My intention is to say that the only recourse that they have that doesn't end up in them basically in the street begging to sell their bodies for a teeny tiny bit of money to a multinational corporation just to feed their families, the only scenario where they don't end up like that is to organize. And I'm not saying it'll work every time. I'm not saying they'll win every time. I'm not saying that they're going to get everything that they want. But it is the only tactic that has borne any fruit in the history of employment for keeping the power of the haves in check by the have-nots. The only way the have-nots can keep the would-be erosion of their rights and dignity at bay.
But there's always going to be the have-lesses who are willing to do whatever it takes to survive, and they will undercut any... Again, this is...
But what you're saying is exactly right, and that's what they're counting on. They're counting on the perception of the worker being like, well, if I don't do this, somebody else is gonna. They have relied on that tactic, again, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, even earlier. If you don't do it, I'll find somebody who will do it, and they'll do it at half the cost that you're going to do it. And the only way that you avoid that situation is organization. Because ultimately, if it just gets down to selling yourself, there is somebody who's going to suck that dick for 50 cents when you wanted $1 to suck it.
Yep.
And none of you, whether you sucked it for $1 or 50 cents, have any dignity.
Yeah.
And it's not your fault that you were put in that situation. It is not your fault that you have to do this in order to survive. But whether it's your fault or not, your only option to put yourself in a situation, yourself and your comrades in a situation, comrades, a good choice of word, to put yourself and your fellow laborers in a position to live a comfortable, happy, and dignified life selling your labor is by organizing and making sure that you can't be taken advantage of.
Right.
I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it works every time. And I'm not saying that you should have to do this.
But that is the third option.
But that is the unsaid third option.
Yep.
Yes. Because otherwise you're left with, do I get taken advantage of here at the company? Or do I leave the company and get
taken advantage of by somebody else?
Get taken advantage of by a whole bunch of different companies by selling myself independently.
It's just so fucking depressing.
Yeah.
It is. It's incredibly depressing. But that's what they're counting on. They're counting on the despair. Despair is an amazingly powerful tactic.
And this is why this is a good movie. It's
Yeah.
not because it's entertaining. It's not because you're going to enjoy it.
But it generates these conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. It upsets you enough to have these.
Yeah. It's like, not to force the metaphor, but it's like war, right? It's like how many battles were won by the larger army simply because they were larger.
Right.
And the smaller army surrendered. How many times has that happened?
Yeah.
A lot. There's a lot of times where an army showed up and they're like, well, fuck that. I'm not even gonna try.
You can
but there
stand and fight and be destroyed. You can give up and be destroyed, or you can give up and be absolved.
But there are situations where the smaller, well-organized army did beat Goliath, right? Did fight them off.
But it shouldn't be used. And I don't want to. We're going tit for tat here.
No, but it's good. That's the.
But that shouldn't be used as. It's hard for me to remove the.
There's no value judgment on it.
Yeah, and it's difficult for me to escape that because by characterizing it as, well, this is the only way that this could work, it makes it feel like, well, you just gotta, just buckle up and just follow this path and it'll work out. But honestly,
but that's the thing is,
it
doesn't always work out. A lot of times, labor movements have false starts or fail to work. But if we didn't have any of them, we wouldn't have a 9-to-5 work week. We wouldn't have weekends off. We wouldn't have holidays off. That wouldn't be the standard.
But with the
these standards, weekends off, holidays off, 40-hour work week, vacation time, sick time, health insurance, these things were
accommodations.
They were
concessions.
They were bought with the blood, sweat, and tears of the organized laborers in the early 20th century who fought for their own contracts and the contracts of their fellow laborers to include these things. And then basically every industry fell into line because that became the standard.
Right.
We weren't given a 40-hour work week from the billionaires because they saw it in their heart to do it. They thought, this is a great idea. We really need to treat our workers well and not work them to the bone and then dispose of them when they're broken and get somebody else. No. They tried to do that over and over and over, and they will continue to try and do that. And the only way to not do that is to organize.
Fair.
Not to say it's easy or will work, but okay. So dislikes. What are things we didn't like?
Yeah. Basically, this is going to sound like a cop-out, but the only thing I didn't like about this movie, really, was the way it made me feel about the subject matter. I mean, it felt very real. It made me feel uncomfortable and sad.
Clinically icky.
Yeah.
It was a great movie, and I agree. Just echoing off what you said. What I didn't like is how it made me feel. And it made me feel things, which means it did its job.
Yeah.
So
it did a really good job of making me feel bad.
I can't hold the things that I didn't like about it against it.
Yeah.
That just means that it did a good job.
Okay. Stuff that I didn't like. This movie is pretty slow.
Yeah.
This movie does not go along at a clip. I think in some respects that kind of lends to the sort of depression, the anxiety that builds as the movie goes on, but it also makes it kind of a difficult watch in some ways.
It took me probably 15 minutes to become invested in the characters.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever really bought in the way I buy in with other movies.
Yeah.
I definitely had a favorite character, but
Was it me?
yeah.
That's fair.
No, I really liked Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry was the best.
Jerry was the union rep, and he was the one giving shit to management, and I was just like, yeah, fucking get him, Jerry.
Yeah.
The sound in this movie is absolutely fucking atrocious.
Yeah.
I don't think it was filmed with any type of like boom mic. And so like it sounds like it was recorded with a camcorder.
Yeah.
Like it's already kind of difficult to understand them because
They're scouse as fuck.
Like they've got sort of their own accent, their own lingo, but they also mumble a lot, which is not uncommon, especially in like that environment, right? A whole bunch of dudes from the same area, of the same upbringing. You can kind of, fuck around with your language a little bit and mumble. But you add that to the fact that like
there were no lav mics.
The sound was on
mics.
like a fucking Super 8 video camera. Like,
was this like a made-for-TV movie? Because it had that vibe to it.
It was definitely, yeah.
It had that vibe, but I don't think so. But you're right. It did have that sort of that texture, kind of like we were talking about the complete lack of like creative cinematography, sort of matched up with that like lack of sound and
like production quality.
Yeah, like low production quality. And I think some viewers may have issues like hearing and understanding this movie, if they have difficulty with accents or whatever.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, it was just sort of an interesting movie. I've never seen a movie quite like this.
Yeah, it gets points for it being unique.
Yeah.
100%.
And not just like throwaway points. Like this is genuinely a new experience for me, I think, in watching this.
Like Herman Munster.
Exactly.
Totally unique.
Exactly.
Driving his Dragula. Okay, so are we ready to move on to Don Quixotes?
Yes.
I've got 1, but technically it's 2 lines. So I'm going to say I've got 7.
Yeah, that's pretty much 7.
That's valid.
I mean, if we're rounding up.
Yeah. And again, in typical fashion, my quotes are not necessarily quotable, if you will, but like...
I was going to joke and say good.
Yeah.
And you said it. So
yeah, no.
I didn't have to.
I felt like this captured, like...
So mean.
No, but it's fine. It's fair.
So mean.
It captured, like, the essence for me, There was a quick bit I think it was like the first third of the movie. Half of the original British Rails team has disbanded at this point, and what few remain are going to inventory was it a derailment?
Yeah.
Inventory the damages on a derailment, and they show up, and there's like 3, 4, 5 other teams on site kind of doing similar things. They're competitors, if you will, or it wasn't super clear.
Yeah, it was they were from like other companies, which is kind of weird because I don't exactly know why
would
multiple companies would be,
Because they all got the same call.
Presumably.
But
they didn't really explain that well.
The guys say, "Are you in charge?" And then this guy on a cell phone just kind of like puts it down for a second and says, "Depends. What do you want?" And again, throwaway line, but for me, it just captured that, like, no one's really in charge anymore.
Nope.
It's just a bunch of separate groups all clamoring for a buck. And the purpose of why they're there is lost. It's just in, this is my job, this is your job. I don't know. It was a very impersonal answer, and that was where their industry became itself very impersonal. There you go.
I have, believe it or not, 7 quotes.
Really?
Actually?
Yeah, which is to say I have 3. My first one is in like the very beginning of the movie when Walmart Craig T. Nelson, who is their like immediate middle manager type, is reading off all of the bullshit that's coming down the pipe from the new owners. And he is like, we need this, and we need to cut costs, and we need to, blah, 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 and all this stuff. And we need a mission statement. And one of the guys goes, what's a mission statement? And he goes, a mission statement is when we say what we want to do, and then we go do it.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
He bless his heart. He was trying so hard.
Oh.
The next one I have, so after they walk in, it's in their contract that they don't have to clock out of their job. They clock in, they don't have to clock out. Then suddenly there's a sign above the work clock that says, now you have to clock out every day.
To avoid fraud.
Yeah, which it is explicitly in their contract that they don't have to do this. So, what's his name? Jerry?
Yep.
Jerry, the union rep, grabs the sign, walks into the manager's office, and is like, the fuck's this? Like, get out of here with this bullshit. And, they get into it and back and forth and blah, blah, blah. And then he comes back and,
He's all smiles.
Yeah, he's all smiles like he just fucking won. And then he's like, yeah, I want us a small concession. We don't have to clock off on Sundays. And one of the guys just immediately goes, we don't clock on Sundays. Like, they don't work Sundays. They don't work Sundays. And he's like, great, we don't have to clock off on the days that we are not here.
It's a win.
It's a win. Yeah, take the win, guys.
Fucking brilliant.
The last one I have is from the scene that Mark's describing after the derailment when, like, you know, these multiple crews, like, show up. And again, like we were saying, these guys who are, like, working independently, they weren't getting work regularly, but, you know, in order to basically encourage the people who are still working under contract for these rail firms to break their contracts and leave, they are currently, at this moment, paying higher wages to the independent workers. And so they're razzing them a little bit about their wage. And two crews sort of like bump into each other. They knew each other from previously working at British Rail. And they basically come to an agreement that one of them will start at one end of the derailment, one will start at the other, and they'll sort of like work their way closer to each other and sort of take an accounting of, you know, what's damaged.
And compare notes.
And sort of like, you know, they'll each do half the work. And one of the independent contract guys goes, yeah, do a little bit less than us, though, given that we're on 15 quid an hour.
Fucking asshole.
Yeah, just razzing her, just winding them up. So good.
Yeah.
Depressing.
So it's interesting that you both have 7, because I have 7 as well.
Oh, shit.
That is a lucky number.
Yeah. Which is to say that I do have 3.
Of course. I never doubted it for a second.
Yeah. So my first quote comes from Walmart Craig T. Nelson in the briefing, and he says something to the effect of, all right, so we've had some fun, but let's get serious for a moment. Deaths have to be kept to an acceptable level. And one of the guys goes, well, what define acceptable? And he says, 2 a year.
2 a year.
Just under the line.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose you got to put a number on it, right?
Right?
You trying to say that 3 is acceptable, Colin?
3
No,
is very clearly unacceptable.
Is it not acceptable?
No.
Yeah, that's outrageous.
Well, we still kill those 2 people, right?
Yeah, you can kill those 2 people.
Okay,
but that's
okay.
all you get for the year.
That's fine.
The whole year?
The whole
Don't
year.
be greedy.
Oh
Don't
my
be
God.
greedy.
Give me 2 every 6 months.
Nope, can't do it. I'll give you 1 every 6 months.
What if I pay you more?
See, that's a gray area.
Yeah, okay. So I can get 4, right?
How about we give you like partial limbs? Would you?
I'll take a mangling, yeah.
Dismemberments are not included in the deaths per year.
Oh shit. Okay.
As long as they survive.
But assuming I get 3 or more, I mean, I could just give you some money and it'll go away, right?
Theoretically.
Good.
Now
Good.
now we're all making
Just like the
concessions.
rest of my life.
Yes.
Just throw money at it. And
Yeah.
everything works out.
And everything goes away. So there's another scene where Paul, one of the rail workers, is on a date with, I believe, the closest approximation of the secretary for the office.
Walmart Sally Field.
Yes, Walmart Sally Field. So Paul is on a date with Walmart Sally Field, and they go back to her place, and things get a little spicy, and they're making out on the couch, and then her daughter comes out of the room, and she's like, Mommy, I want some more milk. And she's like, of course you do. You would.
Bitch.
And
the way you said that was so...
right?
Of course you would.
And so the little girl goes, have you been snogging? And Paul, he goes, snogging? No. Why would I do that? Won't catch me snogging. It's disgusting.
Which was pretty hilarious.
It was awesome.
Yep.
And I think part of it is, like, he handled her so well because he's got little girls of his own. And he was just so nice with her in that moment, but it was just so funny. And my last quote, I thought, was pretty poignant. It's at the tail end of the movie. Jerry is the only one left at this depot. He is the final holdout. He is still hoping that something good will come of all of this. But the depot's been closed. It's been sold off, and he's in his final 12 weeks. So his days are numbered, quite literally. And he's playing chess against himself. And I mean that he will click the button to end his play, get up, walk to the other side of the table, sit down, and make his next move. And the secretary that we were just talking about, she walks in, and she says, who's winning? And he says, checkmate. She goes, what's that mean? He says, whatever move you make, you lose. And she just kind of chuckles and goes, story of my life. And walks out.
Mm-hmm.
Sad, but depressing.
Yeah.
Very good, Lewis. Short, but pointless.
Yep.
Are we ready to riggedy braggedy rate? Are we Lurdern?
Yeah.
I think so. Okay. I like going first, so I'm gonna go first.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. You should definitely do that. Jackson, what do you got?
Okay, go ahead. You know what? Let's play this little game, Colin. Jackson, go ahead.
Yeah?
Let's see where this goes.
Yeah, all right.
Son of a bitch.
I'm going to give this 6.1 tins of sardines.
Oh!
You son of a bitch!
Nailed it.
Go ahead, Colin.
No, you got to choose your next metric first.
Yeah, now I need time.
You got to choose it first, though, so I can steal it.
I did choose it first.
Ripped it right out from under. I chose that like an hour ago.
So did I, and I wrote it down with ink. Did you use ink when you wrote it down?
Brutal. No, I wrote it down in my mental notebook. God. Oh, that was awesome.
I will give this movie a 5.4 snogs.
Solid. What you got cooking over there, Marcus?
All right, here we go.
Yeah.
If my metric doesn't hit you well, just know that this is your fault, because I could have had something with a little bit more levity to it.
Pizzazz.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pizzazz.
But instead, I'm going with 6.8 child support payments.
Oof.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oof.
Could have been light, happy fish.
Ooh.
I still got my light happy fish.
Yeah, but your fish are dead in a can, okay? I was going to go just straight sardines, still swimming, still living their best lives. You had to kill them, put them in little fish caskets.
Yeah.
Speaking of caskets,
Spread them on toast.
We're dead, right? We're done.
Yep.
There's no more here.
Yep.
We're ready to.
I don't
go.
think there's any other thing that we could have.
All right, I'm walking away.
Beautiful. See ya.
That's me walking. That's the sound of me walking.
I like it.
Can you tell how far away I am?
I am. Yeah. I wish there was another way that we could rate this.
I've got an
what?
idea.
Like what?
I've got an idea.
Like what?
What if we did something like a scene score?
Scene score. You started real low there.
I did, but I feel like we ended in a good place.
Yeah, I know. I was like, how am I gonna jump into the season real low? Billy D over here.
Good. It was good though.
Okay, so scene score. We gotta do a scene score.
Yeah.
That's the that's why we're here. Somebody would say that is the sardines and pickles of our podcast.
That is what they say.
I've heard them say that.
I feel like Sardines and Pickles is a band name.
Could be.
Put it down.
Sardines and Pickles.
I'm
Yeah.
seeing them. Live. Fuck it.
And they're definitely, I feel like they do kids music.
I was just going to say it's like the Wiggles.
The Wiggles. The Wiggles and Sardines and Pickles.
Yeah. It's like the British Wiggles. The Briggles.
Too soon.
I feel like the Wiggles is something that you get like in your tummy when like you've eaten something that was maybe not so right. I got the Wiggles.
I got the Wiggles.
Oh, I got the Wiggles.
I'm going to use that.
Maybe the Wiggles is another band.
the Wiggles.
I got the Wiggles. Okay, so
now you're just filling boxes.
now I gotta write Wiggles.
This is the first time for everything.
All right. Thank you to everybody who filled out our movie familiarity survey. Those of you who didn't fill it out, you're dead to us.
Yeah. Screw you.
So just, don't even bother.
Deal with it. Deal with it.
You didn't even get to know what was coming up.
Yeah.
You're going to be blindsided by this. Our average familiarity for this movie was a 1.1 out of 10. No.
That means more than one person have heard of this.
I think you thought this was Flight of the Navigator.
I honestly think that this movie may have been... I purposely put the year in those surveys, guys. Pay attention to those. Or we're going to get a very angry email from somebody who definitely has seen this movie and is going to rip us a fucking part.
But please do.
They better.
Send us an email. Tell us we're wrong.
Yeah.
Even if we're right.
Show us
Which
the
we definitely
error
are.
of our ways.
We'll make fun of you.
Yep.
Incessantly.
We'll enjoy it.
By name.
Okay, so our average score, me giving it a 5.4, Mark giving it a 6.8, Jackson giving it a 6.1. Our average score was a 6.1.
Hey!
Jackson's very happy about
So
that.
I was right, is what you're saying.
That's not what that means.
I got to agree with Mark here. I don't think that's what that means, but coupled with the low average familiarity gives us a slight punch up to a 7.2. I would agree with that, especially with regard to, like, if anything about this movie struck your fancy, especially, like, the themes, I would say watch this movie.
Yeah.
And I would put it higher on your list. But again, if it strikes your fancy, if it's something that caught your attention.
It's better with, like, analysis and conversation.
Which we're so fucking good at.
We're the best.
Right? We're good at that. We're handsome and we're humble.
Absolutely.
Which is like the best. That's the best combination.
Absolutely.
Is that all for the All Crep review? Are we Lurdern?
We are Lurdern.
Well, all right. Thank you for listening, listeners. So the listeners listen to the podcast.
Oh, wait. Is that how it works?
Yeah, you're in a box.
More or less.
Shit.
You're in a box now.
That is you in a nutshell. If you have any ideas for movie reviews, or if you want to get involved and contribute to the Scene Score and get a peek at upcoming movies by taking our shortly weekly-ish survey, you can email us at 3, that is the number 3, menandabasement@gmail.com, or you can find links to contribute to the Scene Score, understand how the Scene Score works, suggest a movie to us, or buy some merch.
Dude, buy it. Buy the merch.
All of it. All of it.
Buy us out. Why not?
We will have nothing left. At our website, tmaab.podbean.com. TMAAB stands for 3 Men and a Basement. Please also be sure to check out, Jesus, Dusty Cherry Pop, who is a very interesting act. Edith is very enthusiastic.
She's enthusiastic, but not experienced.
Those two things don't necessarily go hand in hand.
Well,
oh, there's a lot of hands.
Is that what pops the Dusty Cherry? Oh,
yep.
God. Oh, God. Oh, God.
You gotta do it by hand.
Many hands make little work.
And
little hands make much work.
Yes.
And on a stage far, 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 far away from Edith, in perhaps different festival grounds, is Sardines and Pickles and the Buegos.
The Buegos!
They're all on tour now. You can also find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts. And until then, I am Colin McLeod.
Mark up.
Action Jackson.
And we'll see you in cyberspace.
The
Buegos.
Ooh, that's a new one.
That one's sticking around.